Hey folks, Lexi here. Welcome to my second video. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about my tarot origin story, tarot firsts, how I got to the TarotTube community, how I got to November 2025 with tarot, my history with certain decks, and a little bit of my practice. So I hope you're ready to take a journey to the past and see how I got here today and where I hope to potentially go in the future. All right, let's go to 1999. I was, oh goodness, 13 years old, I believe. And I had a bunch of witchy girlfriends. We were probably all watching The Craft. We were all probably just, as teenage girls are wont to do, kind of finding ourselves, developing our style and our taste, and what niche, what clique we would kind of get into. So I remember going to a Walden Books, so that should age me quite a bit. A Walden Books in Houston, Texas, Memorial City Mall, which is still there. It's still a thriving mall, which is interesting to say because so many malls now are not thriving. But anyway, I went into a Walden Books, and I sheepishly asked the clerk, the sales clerk, to you know, whispering, "Where's your tarot section?" Because at that time, there was a lot of preconceived notions that I didn't even realize I had, but I knew that I wanted to be kind of hush hush about it. So, and I'm not making this up, he took me to the Torahs, and I was like, wait a minute, no. Which, interestingly and funnily enough, to tarot, eventually Kabbalah, all of that is tied in there. Anyway, so I went back to him and said, no, I'm looking for tarot decks. So he's like, oh, okay, I see. So he took me to the tarot section, all the metaphysical books and witchy woo woo kind of stuff, and I found my very first deck. Now, keep in mind, this is not technically still my deck because I did have to repurchase it on eBay at some point because that deck is long gone. Through various moves and shuffles and whoever, whatever, that deck is gone. But my very first deck was the Mythic Tarot. And it was this exact edition with the black backs and the black cloth. So when I found this on eBay a couple of years ago for a very reasonable price, I'm like, Mama, I gots to scoop it up. I didn't really utilize the book at the time. I maybe read maybe a couple of cards. I was 13 years old. I didn't invest the time, and it was just really, I wanted a tarot deck. I didn't want to study, because again, I was in middle school at the time, so I was obviously studying other things and I wanted to hang out with my friends, but just going and showing my friends, hey, look, I have a tarot deck. Isn't it so cool? And of course, I'd always been into Greek mythology. I read, what is it, Edith Hamilton's book several times. And it was just like, this is so flippin' cool, And obviously, we've all seen it before. It's nothing new. I do keep this one in order. I have two. I have the new Mythic Tarot, the Mythic Tarot, and then I keep this in order just because, one, I don't use it. I like looking at it. I don't think I'd ever use it. Digress. So yes, this was my very first deck, and I remember giving my very first reading my junior year of high school, either my junior or sophomore year in high school, the choir, and a good girlfriend of mine knew that I had a tarot deck, and I'm just waiting to get to justice because that's precisely why I wore this particular sweater today. And so I gave her a reading in choir, and we're almost there. And I remember, again, I didn't know how to read tarot. I didn't study it. I didn't know what any of these cards meant. Of course, I knew who was being pictured, right? We have, where is it? Heracles right here with the Nemean lion. Am I pronouncing that correctly? I may not be pronouncing that correctly. But here we go. Look at beautiful Athena here with that checkerboard floor. One of my favorite Justice cards. Anyway, so I gave her a reading. I didn't know anything about tarot. It was all intuitive. I don't really know what I know what the textbook definition of intuition means, but as far as what intuition means applied to a practice or applied to reading, I'm not entirely sure I know what intuition is, and I'm not entirely sure I know what an intuitive reader is. That being said, of course, I did rely on my intuition when I read for her that time. She and I are actually still quite friendly, like on Facebook and social media and everything. Anyway, I need to find the Seven of Swords because I remember that it shouldn't be too hard to find because this deck is in order. This card here always makes me think of her, and the reason it does is because I remember when I gave her that reading all those many years ago in choir, so we're talking maybe 2002. I said something and it struck her, and she's like, "How did you know that?" And it was, I didn't know it, but I said, "Is this your mother leaving?" And it was a very bizarre situation, and in fact, she lived with her father, and he was a single father, and he was raising her. And I had no way of knowing that. We were just girlfriends in choir class. We didn't talk about our families. We talked about music, sure, but we didn't talk about our personal life like that. So I just, again, didn't study it, had no idea what the Seven of Swords meant at that time. I just looked at it and I said, "Is this your mother leaving? Who the hell am I? How the hell did I know that?" It doesn't really matter. This was my very first tarot deck, and I did my very first reading in choir, 2002. So yeah, and interestingly enough, I do have other versions of this deck, but a couple of years ago, I was in a thrift store. I love going thrifting. I love going to antique shops, looking for art. I'm a maximalist. I have loads of art. I have loads of books. Anyway, I found this, the Mythic Tarot Workbook. I don't think I'll ever use this, but this is a piece of flippin' history, right? In my hands. And, funny King of Swords, right? Look at all of this. You have journal prompts. You have all kinds of just luscious awesomeness in this flippin' book that I could, if I wanted to, utilize as a study in the future, which I could use the deck then. But as you will find out, as you will see, when I do a study of a deck, I don't use the deck, which sounds slightly counterintuitive, but that's just how my brain works. Anyway, so the Mythic Tarot, this version here, was my very first tarot deck, and I did my very first reading with it. All right, so let's fast forward several years, a decade and some change, to 2017. That's when my interest in tarot peaked again. I didn't really give it any thought. I didn't have any tarot decks. I certainly didn't have any oracle decks. But obviously I was aware of its existence. I was aware that I had the Mythic Tarot in the past. I was aware of what was happening with tarot at the time because I saw all these decks at bookstores, at local boutiques, things of that nature. And I remember going into a small gift shop and seeing a particular deck. I'll find an image and I'll put it somewhere. And I was just immediately hooked and intrigued. And I was like, "What is this deck?" And I asked the ladies, because it was all sold out. They had only had, God, I wish I could remember it. It's black. I'm screaming at myself while editing right now because I will have a picture of it. The deck and the book were sold separately, so obviously I was going to buy the book and I was going to buy the deck. And thinking about it now, I have no interest or desire to own that deck. It's very pippish, black and white, and it's just one of these kind of edgy, cool girl kind of decks. And at the time I thought, oh man, that is so flippin' cool. But they were out of stock. They only had the display copies. So I asked them, I gave them my name, I gave them my number, and I said, when this comes back in, please let me know. And it was literally a 2-minute walk, a 5-minute walk from my apartment at the time. So I said, okay. And the Northwest 23rd area of Portland, Oregon, if you're familiar, if anyone's familiar with Portland, it's a very touristy kind of area. So they have a particular shop, not New Renaissance, which I am getting to because New Renaissance does come into New Renaissance being a metaphysical store off of Northwest 23rd here in Portland, Oregon. I am getting to that. But this little gift shop, which I frequented all the time, they didn't have it. So I was just like, oh man, I really want this deck. And I would go back. I was annoying. I was a pestering little fool. Funny. For this deck, and they're like, no, we'll give you a call. I went back twice, and eventually I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm going to go on Amazon and I'm just going to buy a deck. And I did a little bit of research. I don't know how I didn't find TarotTube at that time. So we're talking 2017, 2018. I don't know how I didn't find TarotTube at the time, because I did a lot of research on like what I should buy as my first deck. So, to the surprise no one, I bought the borderless edition of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck here. And again, as you will see, it is still very much in order because I didn't use it. And you know what? Screw it, because we're not looking at the Fool on every single fucking deck here, okay? Perfect. We'll do the Four of Pentacles here. Anyway, this deck is still in order because when I study decks, I do not use them. I study them card by card. We're talking the Fool. We're talking the Magician. We're talking the High Priestess. I go in order because I am just structured that way. So when I did Thoth, same thing. When I did Marseille, same thing. I went in order, or whatever order the book tells me to go in. And I don't deviate from that. And I did, one card a day. So January 1st, let's say, as a for instance, I don't think I started on January 1st. I want to say I started like in May of 2018. Anyway, so in May of 2018, I got this deck here, and I started off with the Fool, and I did a card every single day. So by 78 days, I will have done a full study. And what I utilized for that study was this book here. This was my very first tarot book that, and you can kind of see I have little cat tabs on there, and this thing was just, let's see. I highlighted the shit out of this book here. I absolutely adored it. Let's look at where my tabs are. So, my tabs, what is this? Okay, so this is one of my tabs. Not sure what this is. It's a bunch of stickers. How fun. So I tabbed this up for some reason. I think I know why, because it gives you all of your minors, right? And it kind of tells you, you know, the cups is the element of water, pentacles, element of earth, yada, yada, yada. And another one, oh, how funny. What about reversals? I don't read with reversals, and I know a lot of people don't. Anyway, that was my very first book, and I poured over this thing. 78 card study with this book at least 3 times. At least 3 times. I know that for a fact. I wish I had brought in my old tarot journals up from storage, but that's such a hassle. But when I got bored of this book, as you can see, I have plenty of numerous tarot books back there that I would utilize for this study. I just kept going. And the only reason, and it's kind of sad, trigger warning here, I had a really bad breakup in 2018, and then I had a very significant death in my family And then another trigger warning, I had a miscarriage. And so I had a lot of time on my hands. And all I would do is go to work, come home, go to the library, and just study. And obviously, I was seeking out grief counseling. I don't want anyone to think that I was using tarot as a crutch or a substitution for therapy, because it's not a substitution for therapy. I think everybody should understand that tarot is work for yourself, but you still need to use actual licensed therapy to continue to work on yourself. Anyway, I digress. That's a whole nother controversial subject that I really don't want to get into, but I just kind of wanted to let people know that I was not using tarot as a crutch in lieu of therapy. I was going to therapy, but aside from that, when I wasn't working, I was either studying or I was at the library checking out more books, because Lord knows, when you first get into tarot, you want all the books. I didn't want any decks, because I really didn't know there were all of these decks out there. It wasn't until maybe 2021 that I was like, oh my God, there are so many flippin' decks. And that's when I discovered TarotTube. I want to say it was 2021. So let's go to the next little show and tell right along. The very first deck that I felt any kind of connection to that wasn't purely study and wasn't a Rider-Waite-Smith just reproduction, you know, pretty fairy people in Rider-Waite-Smith poses. Although arguably this could be birds in Rider-Waite-Smith poses. Of course, I did just show this in my previous video, but it is a very important deck to me. It's, like I said, the very first had any kind of connection, any kind of affinity, any kind of... This deck gets me. I get this deck. And for that, I actually have two things to kind of tie these together. I bought this book. I love this little bookmark that I bought to go with it, so I just keep it kind of in there. But the Gifts of the Crow was such a good book. I found this in Washington in a little bookstore in Owaco, off of the peninsula in Washington. It's not too terribly of a far drive, just past Astoria going into Washington. Anyway, this book also, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this book inspired this oracle, the Urban Crow Oracle, of course, by M.J. Cullinane. And that deck, again, very powerful. I feel such an affinity and such a fondness for it. That was the very first oracle deck, or let me correct myself here. It was the very first deck I ever modded. And this is going to be kind of a silly mod, but I got the Urban Crow guidebook, right? And then I got this, the expansion. And I was just like, how the hell am I going to tell these apart? Because, you know, am I going to get a card? Okay, let's see here. So this was the mod. You see that little gold hash there? Little hash mark? So that tells me, or told me at the time, so the little hash mark is your expansion, and no hash mark is just the OG regular Crow Oracle, or excuse me, Urban Crow Oracle. But again, if I'm remembering correctly, I believe MJ did mention that Gifts of the Crow was kind of the inspiration for the Urban Crow Oracle. And crazily enough, I actually had this book long before I got into tarot. So it was almost kind of a kismet kind of circumstance that a book that I had read, that I had loved. I've always been obsessed with corvids, crows and ravens, and that kind of stuff. So it was really cool, and just a really interesting moment that something I already owned was a direct inspiration to a deck that I would own and love and have such it to explain. It's the first deck that made me cry, like really really cry, and I will forever love it. I don't know if I'd ever use it again, because I don't want to say it was my first Oracle deck. I want to say it was my third Oracle deck, because I got into Oracle 23. I really focused a lot of my attention and energy on tarot and nothing but tarot and nothing but study. I didn't start reading, like actually utilizing the cards, actually reading the cards, doing spreads, until maybe 2020. If I'm being very serious and very honest with myself. And oh yes, again, the Urban Crow Oracle was not my first Oracle deck. This was my first Oracle deck. And of course, fan favorite, goes with everything. I can show you a few cards. I'm not sure why anyone would need to see them, because Lord knows we've all seen it before, but it's just gratitude. We should keep that in mind, especially this month. Love the backs. I don't think I'd ever do anything. I might edge it, but it's so beautiful. It's so whimsical. It's very romantic and just kind of girly, and I liked it for that. So yeah, those were a couple of decks and a couple of just scenarios and situations that got me to our very next deck, because I got bored. I got so bored of Rider-Waite-Smith. I was just like, God, I've read this book over and over and over again. You buy another book, you check out another book, and it's just like, okay, I'm tired of Rider-Waite-Smith. We'll continue in just a moment. In 2021, this behemoth of a book came out, Tarot Deciphered, and obviously it's all tabbed up, as you can see. This book right here was the one that got me into Thoth. Anybody, let's see here. What card are we on? Six of Swords. Why the hell not? All right. So anyone who has this book, as they know, T. Susan Chang and M.M. Moline, of course. At this point, I was firmly in the TarotTube community. I had my favorites. I would chat. I would comment. Keep in mind, this is years and years, at this point, a couple of years of study, of journaling every day, of daily draws, of doing Rider-Waite-Smith every flippin' day, every 78 cards. Start another one. I would get more books. I would check out more books. And then when this came out, I was just immediately, okay, it has everything. You have your astrology, you have your mythology, you have your Kabbalah, you have your Rider-Waite-Smith symbolism, and then you have your Thoth symbolism. And I was just like, Thoth. Of course, I knew Thoth. I knew Crowley. I was very aware of its existence, but at that point in time, I was a Rider-Waite-Smith girl. That's all I knew. That's all I had studied. So one day in 2021, I remember, because I had this book, trekked on up to Astoria. And Astoria is my happy place. I love going to Astoria. Anytime I'm in Astoria, I buy things, I have fun, I drink, I roam around the river. I just have a blast. So there's a bookstore in Astoria, Godfather's Books. So I went in there, and of course they do have tarot decks in there. I bought, and of course it'll be in order. I promise they are not all in order. But this, in this lovely little bag here, this, let's see, we won't go there. I'm not showing you anything you haven't already seen 3,000 times, right? This was my very first Thoth deck. This is how I got into Thoth. This deck with that book. Now, of course, I did move on to Lon Milo Duquette's book. I have a couple of Thoth books now. I have several Thoth books at this point. And Thoth is my preferred system currently. And of course, I love Rider-Waite-Smith. I will never dog on Rider-Waite-Smith for any reason whatsoever, whether it be the art, whether it be the lack of diversity. Let's give my intro into tarot. And two, it's just a historical touch point. Everyone knows what the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery is. This deck right here is a little scarier to people, is a little more, and tarot in and of itself is kind of scary to the layman, right? Well, anyway, one day, keep in mind, I did tell you that I love to thrift. I love going antique shopping. My partner and I, we weren't living together at the time. And in fact, that's my boyfriend, if you can hear him playing guitar in the room next to me. We found this at a antique shop that was like right across the street from where he used to live. And this is special. And this one I do use. Look, it's not in order, guys. Look, it's not the Fool. Well, anyway, this one is special because it has the additional Magus cards, which I keep in the little white book here. So this is the Thoth that I actually do use. I have maybe 4 different copies of the Thoth that are just Thoth and aren't like M.M. Maline's decks or the Maria Tarot. I do have those. I do have a couple of other Thothy adjacent decks, but I mean, you can't. Let's see here. Let's grab this one. Oh, you can't beat the OG. You really can't, because Lady Frida Harris's artwork is just dynamic. There's something so rich and so all-consuming about the art in the Thoth. So, like I said, after I just got so bored of Rider-Waite-Smith, I was like, you know what? Let's switch it up. Let's learn another system, and learn another system. I did. I will not be going into my first Marseille because that's really not that interesting. I do have 2 or 3 different Marseille books. It's not a system I particularly enjoy. I did learn a lot about how to read tarot and how to utilize numerology and directionality and things of that nature. So I'm happy that I did go into that study, and I am glad that I do have that knowledge under my belt. It's just not something I am keen to bring into my practice all the time. Do I sometimes want to use a TDM? Sometimes, but it's very, very rare. So let's now move on to another first. All right, let's move on to me firmly being into tarot, study, journaling, reading. I'm in Thoth. I decided I'm in this community. I have been watching people. I have been, and I should preface this by saying, funnily enough, my first foray into TarotTube was actually like pick-a-pile readings. I cringe. And I pick a pile, pick a card readings, not because I was wanting that information for myself. I didn't want to know, like, oh, how's my work day going to be? How's my week going to be? I didn't really care about that. What I was doing, or what I was trying to do, was I wanted to see, do I know these cards? Are people reading in the way that I can understand? If I get, okay, the world, let's say the world. If I get the world, am I reading it the same way as Susie Q over here on Susie Q's Tarot Corner, right? Am I reading it the same way she's reading it? And if I'm not reading it, how is she reading it differently that I can kind of utilize in my own practice? Maybe she's seeing something that I don't that could help me in my reading. So eventually I kind of got sick of that, just because I wasn't utilizing it for its intended purpose of getting advice for myself from this stack of cards with the rose quartz, right? I wasn't using it for that purpose. I think I was interested in whatever deck, right? And I think this is most people. They're introduction into TarotTube is searching a deck. Like, is there a walkthrough? Are people talking about this deck? And then I eventually discovered TarotTube, and I had my favorites, and there was all these really cool, like, stuff that's coming up, stuff that's on Kickstarter. Well, I had known about Kickstarter because I'm a huge music fan. I'm a huge music nerd. So bands and artists will utilize Kickstarter for certain projects that they need funded. Of Montreal, I love. They had a DVD of their live shows, and I kickstarted that project. So I was aware of what Kickstarter was, but I had no idea, like, what tarot Kickstarter was. So my very first tarot Kickstarter was this bad boy. I absolutely love this deck. Let's see, I can show you a couple cards here. It's very dark. It's very rich. And the Kickstarter campaign went off without a hitch. Now, this was not the first deck I had received in Kickstarter. It was the first one I backed. I believe the first deck I had ever received from Kickstarter was Brant Palazzo's Moon Baby Tarot, the second edition, which I actually just showed in my last video. But the Baroque Tarot, or is it just Baroque Tarot? Anyway, this deck is so fun. It's so dark and mysterious and brooding, and I wonder if he's playing it right now. One of my favorite cards in this flippin' deck is this card here, because I don't know if you can tell, the guy looks like fucking Morrissey. Like, look at his little pompadour. And the Nine of Swords is such a Morrissey card, and I'm wondering if you can hear my boyfriend again playing in the next room, if he's playing the Smiths, because that would be so interesting. Anyway, so yeah, the Baroque Tarot was my very first tarot deck. Now, I know that there's another Baroque Tarot, or the Baroque Tarot, by a homeboy who's just pumping out decks left and right. Every 3 months, homeboy's got another campaign on Kickstarter. I don't really support him anymore, but yeah, that was my first Kickstarter deck. I don't really know how to end this, my tarot journey, my tarot origin story. I don't know how to end it, so I think I'll kind of do what I did last time and just do like rapid fire kind of stuff. My very first collage deck is this bad boy here, Couture Tarot. It's really fun and special to me because it reminds me of old school, like Vogue and Elle and Mademoiselle. The guidebook, I do know that this is coming out mass market. It's either out or is about to come out, but the guidebook is like magazine paper, and it reminds me of my mom, because she used to keep Vogue and In Style and those kinds of magazines just everywhere. This was also the very first deck that I I utilized fanning powder on, and it's matte and not quite as nice to shuffle. And I guess I haven't really told people how I shuffle. Because I have these long, obnoxious acrylics, I typically shuffle like that, like a waterfall. And this was my very, very first collage deck, and if I'm being honest with myself and with you, it's my favorite collage deck ever. So yeah, that's the first collage deck. Another rapid fire one here. This is the first deck, and probably the last deck. Let's be so fucking for real. This was the first deck that I ever rebacked. And I wish I'll find pictures on my phone and share them here of what it used to look like. The backs were just atrocious, and it's a fabulous fucking deck. I really shouldn't cuss, but it's not like I'm trying to get monetized or I care about that kind of stuff or anything. But this deck pairs very, very well with the Vintage Wisdom here. And I remember mentioning that I would bring up New Renaissance again. I went to New Renaissance because it's literally like a stone's throw away from me. I go there pretty often, just to see what they have. They have a lot of indie decks. They have a load of mass market decks. But they usually have like demos where you can kind of shuffle and play with them and look at the art. So this deck, I want to say this is the Luna Moth or Lunar Moth. Again, like I said, I will find a picture of it and place it somewhere so you can see. So that was my first rebacking, and I think that might be it. I don't really have much else to show, but I wanted to say thank you to anybody who's just subscribed, and I do have loads of ideas coming up with in just what I want to do. Uh, I have an idea of everyone always showcases their decks. They got new decks. They have decks on their wish list. They have decks that are coming out, and they want to show you all the decks and books and things that are coming out in the month of Schmarch, right? Well, I don't want to de-influence anybody, but I really think in this economy, in this day and age, in just the ubiquitousness of tarot and the oversaturation of decks and consumer culture, I would like to do, and it might be my next video, I think, I want to talk about decks that I will never buy, that I will never purchase, that you couldn't even give to me because one, I don't want them, two, they serve me no purpose, right? And I think in this environment and in TarotTube as a community, we just always want, consume more, 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 more. No, I don't. I really don't need any more. Obviously, I'll buy more, and I always have decks coming in. In a single month, I will probably have, depending on the month, because some months are quite dry as far as Kickstarter goes, right? But there are some months where I'm getting maybe 3 decks a month. On a heavier month when it's pouring, maybe 5 to 6 decks. Again, that's when, I don't know about you, but sometimes Kickstarter season really just, you'll get so many decks and you don't know what to do with them. But yeah, if you want to maybe give me some suggestions on things that you'd like to see, I would greatly appreciate that. And yeah, that was my tarot story, my tarot first. And I hope to be back soon with more content, and I hope everyone has a fantastic, fabulous day. Bye, folks.